Adventurelands Part 8. All classes were organized by the type of magic each student had. There were classes for kids with mental and/or theoretical magic, a class for students that could control the elements, a class devoted to healing, and so on. Since I had no unique element, flavor, or ability, I was sent to the Special Cases class. It was the class that had produced a good portion of the most decorated PKers to come from our school, but it was also responsible for teaching some of the very worst people how to cast a spell. Unfortunately for me, it was also the class that had always had the lowest number of graduates. Almost every teacher hated being stuck with this class. It was generally considered the most difficult group, since our abilities were so strongly varied. On average, only one or two students from each year have ever managed to make it to graduation, which was surprisingly low compared to the 10 or so that usually graduated from each of the other classes. There have even been a lot of years where the entire class failed out before the end of the second year. Keeping all that in mind, I wanted to be extra careful who I chose to be my first friends. The professor who had been in charge of the class for the last few years retired at the end of the last year. I was sad to see him go. He had always been one of my favorite teachers. Despite him being immensely powerful, he has always managed to maintain a surprisingly jovial nature. But he was also so old I couldn't blame him for wanting to retire. I was chomping at the bit to know what kind of person our new teacher would be. But Headmaster Mom wouldn't tell me anything about them, no matter how much I pestered her. She never gave up a clue. I knew she wouldn't choose anyone terrible for me. After all, she was the one who'd forced the school to adopt me in the first place. Despite her very detached attitude, she's always been at least a decent parent. When I got to my assigned classroom, there was a machine I'd never seen before. It was so large that it drew my attention before I even noticed who the teacher was. I couldn't begin to guess how it had gotten into the room without anyone noticing. Even more curious was how I'd never seen one of these machines before, anywhere in the school. I'd spent my entire life learning every nook and cranny of this building, and I'd never once seen anything like this before. A tall man that was sort of handsome, in a slightly goofy way, spoke with a surprisingly commanding tone. Okay, everyone, I'm Professor Peralta. Please line up over here and get your controller and your number. You simply have to put one hand on the side of the machine and twist the crank with the other. I was so confused that without thinking, I raised my hand. Then, without bothering to wait long enough for the teacher to acknowledge it, I asked, I know what controllers are for, but this is the first I've heard about any number. What are they? In such a detached tone of voice, it sounded like he was trying to pretend I hadn't said anything. Professor Peralta spoke to the entire class. The design of your number should be a reflection of the kind of magic you'll be able to use. The number on it is a measure of how much magic you can store without a heart. We'll use that to determine where you sit in the classroom. It may be a bit arbitrary, but no more so than going by the first letter of your names. But it's just a giant vending machine. What's your point? Don't they inherently work based on randomness? Mundane ones sure do. I didn't question any further than that. I was sure it would be a complete waste of effort. I just waited until it was my turn, while my most piercing glare shifted uneasily between the teacher and the machine. When it was my turn, I stepped up, put my left hand on the side, and twisted the crank. As it turned, I could hear the same sounds of gravel getting ground up by gigantic gears that it had made for everyone else. But as it made that horrible sound, it felt like I could faintly hear a woman's voice saying, "You." After a few seconds, just like every other student before me, a large ball popped out of a hole near the bottom. Inside, I could see a piece of paper wrapped around something. After a moment, I recognized what must be inside the paper. It was my controllers. I popped the ball open and uncrumpled the paper. It was all black on the inside. There was no number. In the middle of the paper, something that I there was in the middle of the paper there was something that I could feel but couldn't see. I knew it had to be my controllers. I was just astonished that they were invisible. I raised my hand again, still not waiting for the teacher to acknowledge me before I asked, "What does it mean if my paper's all black with no number?" I saw his eyes go wide for just a second before he covered the expression up as quickly as he could. There could be several reasons for something like that happening. Either your magic element is purely darkness to the point where even your number is written in all black as well, or it might mean that the machine wasn't fully capable of reading your magic for one reason or another. That does happen from time to time. It's nothing to be too concerned about. If we haven't gotten you all sorted by the end of the semester, we'll talk to your parent about it. Everyone who can read their number, line up from lowest to highest." He looked straight at me to add, "You can stand anywhere you want for now, depending on your confidence level." Then he turned back to everyone else to finish saying, "In the end, it won't make any difference. If you graduate and get a heart, it will supply you with any amount of mana you need. However, those who can't naturally store as much magic do tend to have to put in more effort in order to get the same results. Therefore, sitting in the front where I can keep a closer eye on your progress is helpful. Once you're all in order, you should take your seat for the year. Once you've found your seat, if you'd be so kind as to write your name on the back of your paper, and then add any nicknames you strongly prefer under it. In a few moments, once it looks like everyone's done, I'll come around to collect them. This shouldn't take long. It's just your name and any nicknames you prefer."